This is political correctness, or is it? Let's tell you a little bit about what happened here. The Chicago Sun-Times made a point of letting their readers know that they censored the political opinion of one of its drama critics when critic Heidi Weiss suggested that tougher profiling of Muslims might have prevented the Boston Marathon bombing. She wrote, "Those still thinking of the horrific terrorist attacks at the Boston Marathon, attacks might well be tempted to ask, what practical alternative to profiling would you suggest?" So that's what she was asking, and the Chicago Sun-Times made a point of telling everybody that they took that out of her review. And joining us right now to talk about this is TV critic at the Miami Herald, Glenn Garvin. Hey, Glenn, how are you, sir?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
Good, thank you very much. You wrote an article on the Sun-Times website. You wrote comments at the Miami Herald, I should say, criticizing what the Sun-Times website had done. And tell me why you feel that they shouldn't have taken Heidi's comments away and then talked about it.
Well, I think, the point here, and really the most important point here, is not whether or not she's correct about profiling. That can be argued. Reasonable people can differ on. There are arguments on both sides of that issue. What is just absurd is this idea that a critic can't include political observations in a review. That is monstrously destructive and just needs to be stamped out. Most art, and practically all art that's of any importance, is about ideas. This is true whether we're talking about movies or as she was, plays, or as I write about television. It's about ideas. And ideas, most of them, are political, either in a broad sense or a specific sense. And it's up to a critic to point those ideas out and engage with them. And I just don't see how a good critic cannot be political. Roger Ebert, who of course injected politics into his reviews at the Sun-Times all the time, from a left-wing perspective rather than her perhaps conservative perspective, he used to say that a critic who didn't state his political biases up front was not being honest with his readers. Remember that a review is an expression of opinion. It's not supposed to be balanced. It's not supposed to be objective. It's not supposed to be even-handed. It's what the critic thinks, and that includes his politics. So I thought it was perfectly appropriate for her to note the argument that play was making and to say that she disagreed with it and she didn't think it made its case.
Now, I should point out, you did. It was my mistake. You did post comments on the comments section in the on the Sun-Times website, stating what you just told us, basically. So she's out reviewing this play called Invasion, and do you think it's because she went there with profiling Muslims that she could have gotten away with it, even coming from the right on something a little less controversial or a little less politically incorrect?
Well, I think that's part of the problem here. I read all the time in reviews stuff like, well, for instance, if Arthur Miller wrote a play called The Crucible, which is nominally about the Salem witch trials, but anybody who looks at it and knows anything about Arthur Miller knows that it's really about McCarthyism in the 1950s, to which he is, of course, strongly opposed. I don't know that I've ever seen a review of The Crucible that does not say, The Crucible is a withering attack on the evils of McCarthyism, or something along those lines. Well, you know what? Nobody ever jumps on that and says, ooh, this is politics, this can't go in, because it's kind of mainstream liberalism that most people, and certainly almost all people in the mainstream American news media, accept as fact. Similarly, I'd be surprised if you could find very many reviews of the TV miniseries Roots that didn't say, wow, this makes us understand the evils of slavery in a new and sharper way. Well, that's a political statement as well. It's a political statement that almost everybody in the United States agrees with, so
Right.
it goes unnoticed. But yeah, I think she got in trouble because profiling is kind of a hot button issue. The people who are against it are really against it. Many of them have a personal stake in it. They come from an ethnicity or a religion where they're subject to profiling, and I can understand that. But that doesn't mean she's not entitled to have a differing opinion.
We're talking to Glenn Garvin, TV critic at the Miami Herald, here on the Steve Malzberg Show. I mean, I could vouch for the entertainment review critics and whatnot, and that aspect of the media, the news coverage, the so-called news coverage, the commentary, the pundits. I mean, I could dictate media bias and where we're headed. You wouldn't want to hear it. I could do it for hours on end. But in your field, sir, do you believe that political correctness, I mean, this is obviously one example of what you and I both believe it is, but do you believe that this is becoming more and more rampant and will continue to rear its ugly head in your end of the business?
Well, I'm not sure if it's more prevalent. Certainly it's prevalent. Okay, no argument on that. Things may be actually a little bit better these days than they used to be. It's fair to say, I write television reviews. It's fair to say that I'm not part of the general liberal consensus out there. I've never been hassled by my editors about this, not in any way, nor has any other critic at the Miami Herald that I'm aware of. Now, there's always a chance that you could say something so far out that we'd probably, most of us agree that, well, that ought to not be in the paper. I can tell you that if I owned a newspaper and I had a movie critic saying, "What's all this complaining about the Holocaust? Hitler, had a lot of good points," I wouldn't let that person write for me. That's too far, way too far. Profiling, I think, ought to be well within the parameters of political debate. It's a complicated issue,
It is
a complicated issue.
It is, and I just had a former Attorney General Mike Mukasey on, and we were talking about not only what Eric Holder had to say today, but also the stop and frisk program being found unconstitutional by a judge here in New York City earlier today. And profiling, what profiling originally referred to in the negative sense was the cops on the New Jersey Turnpike, the case where they were stopping black motorists, only black motorists for speeding on purpose, not whites, and harassing black motorists. And this was a handful of them. And that turned into racial profiling. And, racial profiling to me, and this is, outside of the entertainment realm, is the same kind of good police work that they do with all the other profiling they do. That's how cops work. That's how we work to a certain extent. But it's been turned into a dirty term.
Well, yeah,
you don't have to weigh in.
It can be used in a really dirty way, of course. That stuff on the Jersey Turnpike, that was pretty awful.
Well, that wasn't profile. I mean, that's really harassing and illegal and breaking the law. But it was termed by Al Sharpton as racial profiling, and that just stuck.
Well, the thing I always ask people, and again, I am not making a blanket.
No, go ahead.
Profiling here. But what I always say is, well, okay, if a woman reports she's been raped, do the police go out and question all the women in the neighborhood and demand that they offer an alibi? Of course not. That would be stupid.
Well, the New York City Council has a bill before it that says police would be prohibited from using race in a description to put out on the radio. So when you talk about insanity, that's where we're headed in some respects.
That's just silliness.
Of course.
But listen, I don't.
We're straying, and I don't want to put you in an awkward position.
A thing on profile. But I'm just saying, I think anybody who can consider this from a rational perspective can see that it is something that can be argued and discussed. The play, I haven't seen the play, I should note, but it certainly sounds as if it took a position, it was trying to make a political point. And I think it was very, very appropriate for Ms. Weiss to point that out, and for her to say that she wasn't convinced, that she didn't think the play made its case.
Right. Hey, Glenn, pleasure talking to you, sir. Thank you.
Always, anytime.
Thank you. That's Glenn Garvin, TV critic at the Miami Herald, ladies and gentlemen.